If Bimageddon didn't bite you, Injuryocalypse sure did. It's the Fantasy Forecast, Week 9 recap, and Waiver Wire show. Producer, hit that button. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Forecast with Grindberg and bigz. I am bigz. He is Grindberg. This is our Week 10 Waiver Wire show and Week 9 recap show. I am running on about 2.5 hours of sleep, a couple of hot toddies, a 9-hour workday. I'm about to fall over. And one of my favorite players just got folded, and he looked like a spatchcock chicken. That was the Jaden Daniels injury to me. He looked like a spatchcock chicken. And also, we're coming off a Toronto Blue Jays horrifying loss in Game 7 of the World Series with a game-tying home run and then losing it in extra innings. How are we doing, Grindberg?
Well, we're both supporting our loser team hats today, too. So,
oh, not to mention the failed 2-point conversion after only going to overtime because you missed an extra point against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Schultze on our Raiders Jaguars head-to-head show said it perfectly. If the Jaguars lose to this Raiders team, they're done. I was trying to make the statement that the Raiders and the Jaguars had equal records in 2024, but we're moving in opposite directions. But watching that game, it looked like it didn't matter which team you were watching. They were both the same team. And then they go to overtime, and then it's a 1-point like it was absolute cinema watching that game, because the Jaguars may have a record that looks like they could be playoff bound and the Raiders look done, but both of those teams are equal still. And it was crazy. And then the Chiefs go out and lay an egg, get bushwhacked by the Buffalo Bills for the first time in who knows how long. Not looking good for the Chiefs either. Then we get the injuries that we're going to talk about on top of that. And you had waiver guys out, buy guys out. It was just like Week 9 sucked.
Yeah, it was a tough one, but, we're going to persevere through it, and we're going to get our viewers through it. And we got a lot to talk about here today because a ton of stuff happened over the weekend, and good, bad, and ugly, if you will. And let's get into the storylines. And one of the ugly ones is Kraft crumbles. Packers rising star falls to earth in a crushing ACL tear. It was supposed to be another chapter in Tucker Kraft's breakout season. The Green Bay tight end had become Jordan Love's safety blanket, red zone nightmare, king. He was the second coming of George Kittle, if you will. And midway through the Packers loss to Carolina, the air was sucked right out of Lambeau Nation on a routine play. Kraft went down, clutching his right knee after a lineman rolled on him. Today we got, word he is done. He suffered a torn ACL, ending his season. Now it's looking like Luke Musgrave might be forced into the spotlight in that tight end positions. I'm not holding a whole lot of weight behind that one, but bigz, who do you think becomes the guy now in Green Bay's passing offense? It looks so promising. Is Matthew Golden ready to step into that consistent wide receiver one? Romeo Doubs, he's looking pretty decent. Or are you betting on Christian Watson, that boomer bust upside? Or are we just kind of rolling the dice week after week here now?
So going into the season, the Green Bay Packers were on my list of wide receiver rooms to avoid. Number one, because there are so many different targets that all can be good on any given Sunday. Number two, because Tucker Kraft is a dude. But this kind of clarifies things a little bit. If you look over the last month or so, Romeo Doubs seems to be the main go-to guy, but you can't discount Matthew Golden's draft capital, and I like his profile. So I feel like both of those two guys are definitely rosterable and mostly startable matchup dependent. Packers had a rough one this last week. I don't know how, but it turned out to be rough. And so you can own both of those guys and probably start them most weeks. Luke Musgrave is the interesting story. If we go back and we look at his rookie season, he had quite a few games, including one in the playoffs. He had a 14-point game against Dallas in the wild card division, or in the wild card week. He had 5 games over 8 points as a tight end. That's going to put you in like back end tight end 15 territory. He had those games as a rookie, kind of a mini rookie breakout, not quite on the level of, the guys that but it was pretty good. And then he got hurt and he basically had like a season and a half lost his job to Tucker Kraft. Sorry, I'm having pet issues. And so I am of the opinion he's not in our waiver sheet now because we had already put in we had already filled out our waiver sheet before or filled out the show sheet before he Tucker Kraft got hurt, or I did anyway. And I have a priority ad over Luke Musgrave, but put in a claim for Luke Musgrave behind my recommendation, because if you miss out on my guy, you'll probably have a good time with Luke Musgrave. And
be sure to wait to listen to bigz's guy too, coming up at the top of the hour here. Now, another storyline, just not a great situation whatsoever for that Tucker Kraft. And now we're getting into some other news here. I mean, obviously, Josh Jacobs becomes now a more of a leading source here in that backfield. I think they're going to be leaning on him quite a bit more. Like bigz mentioned, Luke Musgrave might be a guy that's going to be on our radar now based off of his production in his rookie season. He did get injured, and he actually was ahead of Tucker Kraft, leading into that rookie season when those two guys were both rookies. So, he's got some upside here. I don't think he goes in and becomes, what Tucker Kraft has become, but still some upside there for Luke Musgrave. Now, bigz, let's move on to the next storyline here, and that is Caleb's chaos. Bears shock the Bengals in final seconds as their young QB pulls off an historic show. What looked like another heartbreaking finish for the Bears turned out to one of the wildest endings in the NFL season so far. With under a minute to go, the Bears trailing 42-41. Caleb Williams uncorked 58-yard strike to Colston Loveland, who shrugged off two defenders. What a great play. Cincinnati on the other end of the ball turned back the clock. What a game by Joe Flacco. 470 yards, 4 touchdowns. This was a game for the ages, back and forth. Huge performances from guys like Kyle Monangai. DJ Moore was back to his old self, passing score, 72 receiving yards. Now, after watching Caleb Williams bigz pull off that late game miracle and this offense pulling up 576 yards, are the Bears starting to look like a legitimate fantasy gold mine? Who are the must-own players in Chicago's attack right now? Is it open? I mean, it's tough to gauge every week because now we saw what Rome Odunze did this week, 0 catches. What are we doing here with Chicago when they're putting up points like this?
Like I talked about before with the Green Bay Packers, the Chicago Bears were also on my list of players that were tough to own because of the diversity in their weapons. I remember specifically talking about it in preseason shows going, you're not going to know who to count on each week. And guess what happened? Everybody that for the last month has been saying, Rome Odunze, wide receiver 1 season. They got goose egged. DJ Moore did nothing. Luther Burden is a no-show. Caleb Williams didn't do that by focusing on one player. So it's still hard to read because you want to say Rome Odunze. That's what the bones have said. That's what the tea leaves have read for the last month. And that didn't happen this week. And goose eggs are hard to deal with, especially in fantasy. Like, you don't want to start a guy who's the target leader on the team for a few weeks in a row and watch him come out with a 0. that's like super hard. That's a hard pill to swallow. I do want to go back a few weeks ago. I told you that Caleb Williams was a priority ad because he had some pretty good matchups coming up. And that kind of fell flat on its face against New Orleans, 5 points, against Baltimore, 12 points. But he sure showed it this week. And again, he's got the Giants next week. That should be a good matchup. And then he's got San Francisco, which is a good matchup in week 17, which is a lot of fantasy playoffs. So he's still a good quarterback to roster. You're just going to want to sit him weeks 13 to 16, probably. As far as a legitimate fantasy gold mine, I still haven't wavered on my take that it's hard to own any one person in this pass receiving core because you don't know who to rely on week to week. And we saw that play out this week with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at that Ben Johnson offense, it's tough to pinpoint sometimes week to week who's going to be the beneficiary, and it's just matchup dependent. You look at maybe how that game is going to be structured now from now on. Look at what Kyle Monangai did this week here. We got to look at that backfield now too, and thinking that, you know, he's played himself into a good amount of work now moving forward, maybe a 50-50 split, even that, right? You know what I mean? You're going to see that, you know, Gibbs Montgomery kind of role here in Chicago taking over.
That's not necessary. They could cut DeAndre Swift. They could trade him away before the trade deadline, and they have like a bell cow RB1 at home. We waited 3 years for the Roschon Johnson breakout, and Kyle Monangai was the friend we made along the way. Like, I am so bereft because of the lack of Roschon Johnson breakout. And like, you couldn't have told me 6 weeks ago that that if DeAndre Swift went down, Roschon Johnson wouldn't be the guy that took over everything. But instead it would be Kyle Monangai. I would have said you were crazy. Now I'm like, you better put Kyle Monangai on your roster, which that's another one that we talked about a couple weeks ago. That was another one of my priority waiver ads. Go get Kyle Monangai. And look how it paid off this week. So we have some starts and sits to talk about in a little bit. And some of those didn't quite work out the way that we thought they would.
Yeah.
But the track record of this show with our waiver wire ads and the starts and sits shows, we're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
We tell you to pick up somebody on waivers. We may not have them in a start role, but if you picked them up off waivers, you're definitely benefiting. So Monangai and Caleb Williams are the most owned players. You start Kyle Monangai every week. He's, in my estimation, taken over that RB1 spot.
I think it's going to be a little bit more of a split. I think that, you know, he's worked himself into a good role, and we'll have to see. I mean, they're going to be, you know, we see what Ben Johnson did last year and the years before with Detroit. I think he likes having the two running backs, and I think that they're going to preserve each other. But obviously, I think Monangai has been very efficient with his opportunities, and I think he's certainly could by end of season position himself to taking over that backfield fully.
Spoiler alert, that's what I said about the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, they got to go where the money is at first, right? And then they're gonna, you know, look at the money, and then they're going to look at the production, and then
also that's what I told you about David Montgomery. You were super high on Gibbs, and I was like, whoa. David Montgomery is still a thing.
Absolutely, and David Montgomery, I was fading Montgomery, and he's not anywhere near the top 24 running back that you had pegged him as. So I faded him out of that range. So we're in good shape with that call. But obviously,
I didn't fade David. I didn't say David Montgomery was going to hit. Yeah. I just said Jahmyr Gibbs wasn't going to be the RB1 because David Montgomery was still going to be getting play. And Jahmyr Gibbs he's having a good year. He didn't help me this week, but
he didn't. Yeah,
let's move on.
Let's get on to Drake London, because this is a guy that certainly helped my rosters this week, and you know, helped propel it to fantasy goodness. And he took flight, and the Falcons star puts on a one-man highlight reel in a heartbreaking loss. If you watch that game, that showdown in week 9, you probably came away asking one question: is Drake May human? After missing last week with a shoulder injury, returned with a vengeance, 9 catches, 118 yards, and a career high 3 touchdowns, each one more jaw-dropping than the last. His final grab, a one-handed toe tapper on 4th down. What a play. Now he's looking like pretty legitimate wide receiver one headed in for this home stretch. Now, bigz, after another monster game, he's put together 4 in a row, obviously with, excluding the game he missed, 3 touchdowns in this one. Where are you ranking him rest of season? Is he creeping into that top 5 wide receiver tier or just sitting outside that elite group right now?
I mean, he has to be in that conversation. When we look at, let's just isolate it by unscore. Where do you go? His unscore is 12th in the history of the unscore. So since 2018, Drake London sits at 12. I'm of the mind that it's not a terrible idea to take the top 12 of the historical unscore and make that your top 12 in fantasy, with the exception of a couple people like Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy. But we're talking Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, MHJ, that's another exception, JSN, Chris Olave, maybe another exception, Jerry Jeudy, Jordan Addison, Amika Ibuka, Devontae Smith, Drake London. Garrett Wilson is just on the outside of that. There aren't a whole lot of guys who are finishing in the top 12 every week that are outside of that conversation. So I think it's a pretty good model. Drake London is right there as a wide receiver one in the historical unscore model. What does that mean? That means that he can flash and have games like he just had. He can also, quote unquote, disappear and wind up as wide receiver 15. I think over the course of a full season with somebody who's healthy, they have the upside to finish as a wide receiver one multiple times, which Drake London has. And when they have a bad game, they're still in the teens. That's definitely somebody who's in the top 6 conversation. Now, looking at the numbers of his relationship with Michael Penix, he has more top finishes with Michael Penix as quarterback than he has in his career so far. That includes Marcus Mariota. That includes Kirk Cousins. He and Penix are a thing. And Kyle Pitts and Penix are a thing. Kyle Pitts is not taking away from Drake London. And Drake London was making some masterclass type catches throughout the game. This is a guy that if Raheem Morris isn't an idiot, he's got to look at that game film and go, we need to give this guy 15 targets a game. And I think that as fantasy players, we should follow that. We need to have him in our lineups every week.
Absolutely. And I think that you said some really great points. I think the only thing that to add to that and that might cap his ceiling is we're looking at games where he is without Darnell Mooney. And when Mooney plays, he garners a little bit more of that attention and some target share there. So when Mooney comes back, that might cap his ceiling here. But we're looking at Drake London as the last game 40% target share. When he's connected with Michael Penix, he's hitting at I think a 30% target share plus. So yeah, I love this connection. And, he was one of my bold takes at it into this year as, finishing a top 5. I'm still standing with that. I think he's going to finish strong. And that's why I asked that question to see where you're evaluating him right now.
In his last 4 games, he has 3 finishes over 26 points, one with 26, one with 31.8, one with 38.8. He doesn't have great matchups going into the playoffs. In the playoffs, he sees Seattle, Tampa Bay, Arizona, and possibly the Rams. So week 12, New Orleans, that'll get you in. But he seems to be, I don't know if you could say he's matchup proof. His big boom weeks were against very, very good matchups, except for Buffalo. So I guess it's a mixed bag. It looks like he's kind of matchup proof on paper because he's had terrible games against really good and really bad defenses, but he's also had boom games against good defenses. So you just got to roll with him. He reminds me a lot of Garrett Wilson. If he's on the field, you got to put him in your lineup, period.
Mhm. Absolutely. All right, let's move on to our next big storyline. Biggs and Brock is back. Bowers erupts for 3 touchdowns and reminds fantasy managers why he's a cheat code. After weeks of frustration, whispers of a sophomore slump, he was silenced. All critics, he was banged up. He missed some games, but even in the games he did play, I think he was, ranked like tight end 11 in fantasy points per game. And now the Raiders superstar, fully healthy, back to where he was the personal highlight reel. 12 catches, 127 yards, 3 touchdowns, even though Vegas fell short in overtime with that failed 2-point conversion. Fantasy managers who kept faith in Bowers were rewarded with the tight end performance of the year. The chemistry now is undeniable. He's commanded nearly a third of the team's targets and reminding everybody why he was the first round fantasy pick. And Bowers' monster comeback game. Is it safe to say he's locked back in as the tight end 1 overall here, Biggs, or do we need to see him string together a couple more of these games before we go all in again?
This is a tough one for me. So as everybody that watched, and I don't want to spoil later content in the show, but as everybody who watched our starts show saw, I was absolutely over the moon about the fact that I got to say throw Brock Bowers into your lineup. Not that anybody was debating whether or not they would. As soon as anybody who owned him knew he was going to be on the field, he was going to go into their tight end spot, period. So it wasn't a revelation. However, it was an opportunity for me to talk about him, which I will take every opportunity to do. He had a tight end 2 finish in week 1, got banged up, didn't do so hot against the Chargers, the Commanders, or Chicago, and then he was off the field for 4 straight weeks with the bye. So that's not helping any lineups. He comes out and he has that performance against Jacksonville. Here's the thing. Jacksonville was a great matchup for him. Jacksonville is terrible against tight ends, and the Raiders exploited that. He had his target high of the season at 13. Of course, he had his catch high at 12. He was making things happen after the catch, and he wound up with 3 touchdowns because, let's face it, he was the go-to target. One of the funniest things that I saw this weekend was how on his first touchdown catch, when he caught it, landed with his butt in the end zone, the Jaguars cornerback Newsome started celebrating. It was a touchdown, bro. You didn't do anything, but you're celebrating. Anyway, moving forward, he's got Denver, Dallas, Cleveland, the Chargers, Denver again, Philly, and Houston. All of those, if you are on Sleeper, all of those are orange to red matchups. That means they're in the back half. Those defenses are in the back half of giving up tight end points. That's not good. However, we all know his talent level. And all it is a matter of him getting the targets from the Raiders. And I think for Chip Kelly, and hey, Chip, I know you're watching the show, get the ball to Brock, period. That's it. So after my saying that to Chip Kelly, my message to Chip Kelly, I think it's safe to say he's a top 5 tight end the rest of the way.
Yeah, I love it. And honestly, Biggs, I think if your O-line was any sort of respectable, your team is a very good football team.
All that Geno needs is time for
Yeah.
the deep, fast guys to get down the field, and that'll open up the game for Ashton Genty. The problem has been Chip Kelly's play calling. He calls a run on first down every time. If I was a defensive coordinator, I would be calling a defensive run blitz every first down. Genty then, because of a poor offensive line, gets 3 yards, then they're in a pass situation immediately. Why don't you kind of open up the playbook, pass the ball on first down? Geno is a very efficient quarterback when it comes to play action pass, and he's good with deep balls. These are things that Chip Kelly is. It's almost like Chip Kelly has a blind spot to Geno Smith's talent level and what he can do with the ball. He threw one interception this week, and it's like, oh no, Geno threw another one. And then you're like, oh, well, at least he only threw one. But then when you go back and you watch the play, Michael Mayer didn't come back on the ball, which he should have done. And he said it in the post-game press conference, I didn't come back. That one's on me, not on Geno. So it's Geno played a fairly flawless game, which is what we expected. There might be good things ahead for this Raiders team. The problem is their schedule. They have one of the worst schedules moving forward. It's not going to be pretty. I don't see them winning another game at all.
Yeah.
And but they're going to have to throw the ball to Brock and give the ball to Genty. And so own those two guys.
Love it.
Make trades if you have to.
Well, and then our last monster, I guess there's a couple more storylines we could hit, but we're going to try and talk a little bit about them through the studs and duds and the other part of our show. But the last big storyline we want to hit tonight is Dan Quinn's nightmare. We look at Jaden down, Commanders crumbling, and fantasy managers now in panic mode. Week 9 turned into a full-blown horror show for Washington fans and fantasy managers alike. The Commanders head coach admitted he missed it when he failed to pull Jaden Daniels before the drive. I'm not sure that's going to make any difference. You're not going to pull your star guy, even if you're not like within the game at that stage. You add in Terry McLaurin's nagging injury, and they're just aging. There's a lot going wrong here for the Commanders. It's time to reset. It's time to relock. And what are we doing here now, bigz, with the Commanders after this suffering this loss with Jaden Daniels sideline? Mariota is now stepping in. How much of a downgrade are we talking about for Washington's offense in general? Is there anyone left on the radar to roster worth trusting in your fantasy lineups next week and beyond? In
Well, you're not going to have Luke McCaffrey, but you are going to have Deebo Samuel
and Treylon
Burks, who had one catch for 14 yards as a 14-yard per catch average. And actually, based on DVOA and efficiency metrics, the Commanders have been better with Mariota on the field this year than they have with Jaden Daniels, which is kind of surprising. Now, Jaden Daniels has been better in fantasy than Marcus Mariota, but we all watched Marcus Mariota put together a top 10 quarterback season when he was with the Falcons. He can do that. That's his upside. He is a must-own, doesn't make our sheet, but he is absolutely somebody that you need to have on your roster if he's on waivers. You need to make a claim or throw some fab out there for him. Bill McCroskey-Carrot ain't it. I think Chris Rodriguez is the one to own on this team. It's not that he's going to do much for you, but if he does get the ball, he's going to be more highly efficient than McCroskey-Carrot or Jeremy McNichols. And then, Zach Ertz gets a boost when Mariota comes out there. And hey, I'm still banking on a Treylon Burks breakout. And if there's never been a great time for it before, there is now. And then we know that Deebo is their go-to guy at this point. McLaurin will be back on the field at some point. They're better with Mariota. So yeah, I think they're fantasy fine. It's just, we need to watch things play out. We need to see Rodriguez get the majority of the snap share and the touch share, etc. We need to see Treylon Burks folded into the system. You can look at Jalen Lane. He's fine. Well, let's look at the next couple weeks. Does Jalen Lane have a higher target share than Treylon Burks? If that stays consistent over the next couple weeks and Jalen Lane does something with it, go ahead and grab him. It's a rotting carcass of the oldest roster in all of the NFL, but there might be some bright points there. So look at it. And right now, I'm going into my home league and I'm changing Jaden Daniels' nickname in it is Smooth. That was a nickname that was given to him in college. I'm changing it to Spatchcock Chicken.
Spatchcock Chicken. All right. I like it. I like the call. You know, I liked some of my calls last week, but I did not like a couple. And now we're in some ownership time of our week, and probably my worst week as a predictor here, and it just didn't go towards plan for me.
It did not.
Yeah, I told everybody to. Well, I mean, couple hits. I mean, sit Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. That did not pan out for him. I told everybody to sit Cortland Sutton. He had one catch, but it ended up being a touchdown. I still call that a win because certainly wasn't in the top 24. And then I told everybody to start DK Metcalf, and that was his worst game of probably his career. And Kamani Vidal also was not a start in a really easy matchup that should have been there for him. So I'm going to reassess my starts and sits, and hopefully it'd be better and back up to my 75% hit rate as I was. So 50 ain't bad, but not my best week for sure.
So I'm going to go ahead and do what the viewers love, and that's my hat change. I'm going to start with my L's. I said to sit the Patriots wide receiver core. Popped, but he only had 6 targets. One of those included a touchdown, so he wound up with 20 points. My overall point was we don't know with Booty out there, Hunter Henry, Pop Douglas, we don't know who the guy to count on is. Now, if you had a need to put Pop Douglas in your lineup, then you were fine. If you started him over somebody or started somebody else over him, because I said don't start Patriots wide receivers, I apologize for that because there was not any. There wasn't an analytical read on who was going to be the leader. Booty has been the leader, but it was Pop that came out this week.
And Booty was a late scratch as well, so that probably was a reason that Pop ended up popping.
Sure. And so I'm wearing the L hat. However, I'm going to call it a push for me and my heart, but for viewers who may have sat Pop, for somebody that underperformed, I'll take the L. I also said sit Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard both. I'm sorry if you listened to that, but my reasoning was good. I said we don't have a clear picture on how this backfield share is going to work. Now we have a clear picture of how that backfield is going to work. Rico Dowdle, like we all thought and hoped, is the lead back. Chuba Hubbard takes the back seat. We wanted that, but we didn't know that was coming this week because of what happened the week prior when Hubbard came back on the field, and they had a pretty equal snap and target share or touch share. So again, I'm going to take the L on this for the viewers, but in my heart, it's a push. All right. Now, here we go.
Got the dubs.
To the W's. I said to start Michael Pittman. And guess who had a top 10 wide receiver finish in a shootout against Pittsburgh, wherein Daniel Jones turned back into a pumpkin? Sorry, Cinderella. The shoe didn't fit. Michael Pittman, top 10 finish as of Monday. That was a pretty fantastic call of mine. That's a W. And then, of course, Brock Bowers. Okay, so I'm not going to take the win on Brock Bowers because, A, everybody who owned him automatically put him into their lineups. B, he was not available as a waiver pickup. He shouldn't have been, so he probably wasn't. So it's not like you lucked into it. Number 3, me saying to start him wasn't great advice because you were going to do that whether I said anything or not. However, me pumping him up and he finishes as tight end 1, I'm going to take that as a win. He had an historic game. There are 2 people who have done what he did this last week with his number of catches, number of touchdowns, number of yards. And I forget the first one, but the second one, you throw in 5 yards rushing, and the only person who's ever had a game like that in history was Jerry Rice. So now there's one echelon up there in a certain did I say certain? In a certain statistical category that includes only Jerry Rice, the greatest NFL player of all time, and Brock Bowers, the greatest NFL player of all time that has eaten my pizza.
You didn't say the greatest player of all time, though, Tom Brady, but we'll move on from that.
No,
And
Jerry Rice is the greatest NFL player of all time.
We'll let the rings decide that. All right,
Yeah,
let's
you won't talk about rings. What I want to say is you look at the things that Jerry Rice did, and you talk about positional difference and who was better at their. Tom Brady has competitors at the quarterback position. Jerry Rice has no competitors at the wide receiver position at all.
He's got no competitors as a champion. That's kind of the idea of the game.
Is team game, right?
Anyways, let's move on to our waiver wire pickups, bigz, because we're 35 in and we got to rip through these ones. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of week 10 and who our fantasy viewers need on their lineup. So in their rosters, let's start with we're going to wait to the end to talk about your spotlight here, bigz. So maybe I'll talk about my tight end first, and then we'll move on to running backs and stuff like that, and we'll get into your spotlight right at the end because everybody's waiting for it. All right, I'm going to talk about Theo Johnson because he's a guy that if you're limping through a tough season here, there's one bright spot right now outside of Jackson Dart in the Giants offense, and that is the rookie tight end Theo Johnson. And the future is bright when you look at their offense moving forward. Rookies, Theo, Cam Scatabo, Jackson Dart, these guys are all rookies and they're going to be headed into their second year looking great. And Theo Johnson came in and he's looking like he's the second in command for target share, and that could even become number one by the end of season if that chemistry with him and Jackson Dart continues to blossom. 5 touchdowns in his last 6 games. That's big for a rookie. He's got 27% target share in week 5, averaging 5.8 targets per game since week 4. That's great production here, and especially at this position. Obviously, there's a couple other guys that we're looking at on the waiver, but Theo Johnson is a guy that if bigz's guy is still isn't around, he's a guy I'd be looking at picking up on top of Luke Musgrave as well that bigz mentioned. But yeah, Theo Johnson for me.
Well, our viewers will already have Theo Johnson because in a previous waiver wire pickup show, I told you all to go grab Theo Johnson. Quick question, Mike. Do you know what Jackson Dart ranks since he started as QB? Like, what is his fantasy QB ranking is since the first week he started?
4?
3. Jackson Dart, who we on this show have been pumping up since preseason, since the Senior Bowl, have told you all to draft, have told you all to pick up on waivers, have had shows surrounding totally involving Jackson Dart in Dynasty and redraft, all of it. We've been telling you for months to own him as a quarterback. Since his first game that he started, he is QB3 in the NFL. Theo Johnson, who is second year, by the way, he and Malik Neighbors were 2024 draftees. Theo Johnson is for real. We were just waiting on the breakout. And a few weeks ago, I told you to go grab him. So you already have him on your roster. But if you didn't listen to me, listen to Mike. It's kind of like Hans and Franz. Hear me now, believe me later.
Yeah.
Listen to Mike. Go grab Theo Johnson.
All right, bigz. Why don't you get into your wide receiver pickup this week?
So a funny thing happened watching Daniel Jones turn into a pumpkin and DK Metcalf having an absolute trash game. Aaron Rodgers started peppering Calvin Austin with targets. We talked about Calvin Austin in the preseason, and Chev and I have been high on Calvin Austin for a long time. One thing that we know about Aaron Rodgers, besides the fact that he's from Chico, California, went to Butte College, was my quarterback at Cal, and is an MVP and Super Bowl champion, and will definitely go into the Hall of Fame, but also he's kind of a jerk. When he finds somebody that he trusts, he goes to them over and over again. And one of the developments that I saw in the game against Indianapolis was that he has a lot of trust in Calvin Austin, and he was going to him a lot. It doesn't mean that Calvin Austin is going to have a huge breakout. It doesn't mean that this target share for Calvin Austin is going to continue. But there is an indicator that there is a possibility that Calvin Austin becomes a trusted go-to target of Aaron Rodgers. We talked last year in 2024 when Rodgers was with the Jets about his relationship with Allen Lazard and how we wanted to see Lazard break out because they had a relationship. This is another similar situation. We saw what happened. It took Davante Adams 3 years or 4 years to get that relationship with Rodgers. But once it happened, Davante Adams became a Hall of Famer. This may be the cusp of a beautiful relationship. So I want Calvin Austin on all of my rosters this week.
There you have it. All right. I'm going to talk about a couple wide receivers, kind of in tandem here. Both these guys that, popped last night in the late afternoon games. I'm going to touch base here. I'm going to prioritize this guy after I do my spotlight video. Okay, so my first and my top priority guy at the wide receiver position, outside of bigz' guy at the end of the top of the hour here, I'm going to talk about Parker Washington. When they lost Travis Hunter, the Jags, to injured reserve, most of us thought that Brian Thomas would be the guy that would, come in and take on the majority of that. I started picking up, Washington when I heard the news. Just taking stabs because, there was De'Ami Brown, who's also somebody that should be on people's radar, but it was Parker Washington. And coming out of the bye, it was him. He stepped directly into Hunter's role that we all thought that he would come into. The aspirations were high for Travis Hunter, but it doesn't look like it's going to pan out now. 7 catches for 77 yards on 8 targets, most targeted person in that game. He looked confident. He looked, most importantly, he had the trust of Trevor Lawrence, something that Thomas has not been able to establish all year. With Thomas nursing that ankle injury, he just hasn't been the same player that he was last year. Washington is now stepping into a high volume role and is suddenly more aggressive on the Jags passing attack. He led the Jags with 8 targets, earned 26% target share, ran routes on 92% of his dropbacks. He averaged 2.15 yards per route run since week 7. That's a great metric. Anything over 2 is money in the bank. And next week he faces the Raiders defense. So I'm loving this situation for Parker Washington, continuing that momentum. And he isn't just filling in, he's emerging with Hunter sideline, Thomas limping. This is going to be a situation worth notable. And another guy that popped last night that you should be keeping your eye on as well. We mentioned him in the preseason. I was really high on Torrey Horton, and it was just a matter of time before his opportunity came. He's becoming a red zone threat. He's in that slot role with Cooper Kupp banged up. And if that continues, we're looking at Torrey Horton becoming a staple in a under the radar, high powered offense now led by Sam Darnold, who many people were fading this offseason, but not bigz. And he kept me on the Sam Darnold train. And I'm glad I did, because look at what is happening. Sam Darnold became, setting some records here for the Seahawks. I'm looking at this and, loving every minute of it. And Torrey Horton is going to reap the benefits if Cooper Kupp is sidelined still. So 2 of these guys, I personally would prioritize Parker Washington ahead of Torrey Horton, just based off of opportunity and, maybe more opportunity moving forward. But can't deny what Torrey Horton has brought into the table so far.
Yeah. You mentioned Parker Washington. He faced the Raiders on Sunday.
Sorry. Yes.
He's playing Houston, I believe, this coming week. And Torrey Horton has been on the radar. He was part of our like rookie drafts. One of the things that is important to look at with wide receivers in fantasy is their first read target share. And neither of these two guys are first read guys, and they're not going to be. So what happens is most plays are going to be drawn up so that Brian Thomas Jr. is the primary target, or Jackson Smith and Jigba is the primary target. When the quarterback sees them down the field, if it doesn't look like they're in an open situation, they're going to go to their second target. Now, that's fundamental football. These two guys have become the second read targets in those offenses. And when we have a historical season from Sam Darnold, when we look at the efficiency of Trevor Lawrence when he's throwing to Parker Washington, both of them are absolutely startable every week.
Love it. All right, bigz. It's time for your spotlight.
But I didn't even get to my running back.
We're going to end with running backs.
So here's the thing. I was watching football on Sunday morning, and I heard I watch multiple boxes, and I have Red Zone, and then I have 3 other games that are on, and there's a lot going on, and my ears pick up stuff. Plus, I'm sometimes trying to go back to sleep, and I'm coming off of the Breakfast with Big show, which I told somebody to start Parker Washington on Sunday morning on Breakfast with Bigz, which is exactly why you should be watching the show. Also, I hope that my start or sit question for you worked out, because you asked me one. I hope it worked out. I don't remember what it was. Anyway, so I hear something in my ear, which is usually how that works. Cole Kmet leaving the game injured. And my brain immediately jumped to Colston Loveland now becomes the primary tight end target on the Chicago Bears offense. You can verify, Mike, I've never filled out a show sheet so early. I immediately went to the show sheet and put Colston Loveland in. And then what happened? Colston Loveland scored a touchdown. And I was like, cha-ching. And then they go to late game. Chicago's driving, and he has an absolute incredible catch and run to win the game. I was on Colston Loveland before any of that happened. The message there is you have to have Colston Loveland on your team, and he is available in 90% of ESPN leagues or more. So make it happen, because you just lost Tucker Kraft, or you're struggling at tight end because whatever, or you drafted Michael Mayer because he was filling in for Brock Bowers, and now Mayer's not doing much. Go get Colston Loveland. Do it this week. It's time. He's going to be a thing. This rookie tight end class is ridiculous.
And we knew it headed in, and we got a lot of shares of them, so we're reaping the benefits in all of our formats. Okay, let's get into our running backs now. Bigz, my running back waiver wire ad is somebody that's kind of been under the radar because he was on a bye last week and quietly sat there waiting to step in what could be an opportunity here of this season with rookie standout Quinshon Judkins. He's nursing that shoulder injury. We're still not sure if he's going to play this week, and this will suddenly open the door for Dylan Sampson. And we talked about him on the show earlier this year. Obviously faded when Judkins came back, but now when Judkins left that game in week 8, he played 19 of 27 snaps since the exit, and played more than Jerome Ford. We know what's going to happen here. If you blink, you're going to miss him. And Sampson will surface up here. He's got that upside with the catching back too. Played 70% of the snaps after that injury. 20 receptions for 133 yards and a touchdown this season. Has that upside there. Averaging 4.9 yards per carry as a receiver. And he faces the Jets off defense in week 10, which ranks bottom 10. And if he can get into the lineup here as the starter, he could be a guy that is, putting in your lineup as an RB2 with some upside here. So with that patch catching profile. So I'm liking a buy low window here. And get yourself some Dylan Sampson if you can, if he's still on your waiver wire, especially now if Judkins does miss this game.
So by all indications, Judkins is going to play. That doesn't take out Dylan Sampson's fantasy relevance. This is a guy who has the profile of a 3-year declare, which is you want to see that from running backs. He also was, I think he was the second youngest. He also was the fastest. So he's got a profile that screams like this guy is going to be a thing. He may not get the snap share immediately, and Quinshawn is back, but he's absolutely rosterable.
There you go. Yeah, they're still very skeptical. We're not sure what is going to happen. They're hopeful for Quinshawn, so this is just kind of like a deep dive stash at this stage. And hopefully, if Quinshawn doesn't play, you have him, stashed away, and he's an automatic start there against a weak matchup here in week 10. Now, bigz, finish off this show with your running back ad.
All right, my running back ad is Blake Corum. So overall, the touch share that Corum and Kyron Williams had in this blowout victory that the Rams had was about 33% to Corum and 66% to Kyron Williams. The thing is, though, that it was they did leave Williams off the field and go multiple times to Corum, and he was very, very good when he got the ball. What that says to me is that if at any point in the next few weeks something happens to Kyron Williams, Blake Corum is going to be the guy that they go to, and he's going to do well with the ball. He doesn't have the role that Kyron Williams has at the moment, but if something were to happen to Kyron Williams, and I've had a few of these guys over the course of this season where I was like, grab this guy and stash him, because if something happens to the guy in front of him, you're going to want to have him on your roster before it becomes a waiver where because you don't have priority or you don't bid enough fab for him. Blake Corum is going to be a guy that if something happens to Kyron Williams, he's going to be on this show as you make sure that you have him again. So make sure that you do it this week. Stash him. Drop somebody on IR. Make sure that you have him. By the way, Omarion Hampton might be coming back for the fantasy playoffs. So go ahead and make trade offers to struggling teams that have Omarion Hampton. Try and get him on your roster while he's still on IR, because he's going to help you if he comes back and you're in the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, and just look at how the Rams are playing right now. They're a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Matthew Stafford is playing some of the best football I think he's ever played in his whole career here. Same with the likes of Joe Flacco. It's incredible to see what these aged veteran quarterbacks are doing. And yeah, great call on the Corum. And continue to get him around, because one injury away and he's in a high-powered flying offense, and he's already carved himself out a role, even with Kyron Williams. So love it.
Somebody in a group chat that I'm in was talking about Sam Darnold MVP, and I was like, it's Matthew Stafford.
There you have it.
He's got like 24 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, and we're halfway through the season. If he eclipses 40 touchdowns and throws fewer than 5 interceptions, you can't not call him an MVP.
There you go. All right, bigz, let's wrap up this show for the week, and we got a lot going on for week 10. So let's get into it. Let's unwrap what's happening for week 10 here on FSAN.
I gotta go back to work tomorrow and open the store. And you mean with the shows?
Mm-hmm.
FantasySportsAdvice.com is where you want to go for all of the content. Coming up this week, we've got Points After Thursday, which guess who's not going to forget this time? This guy. Points After Thursday, after the Thursday night football game, right here on FantasySportsAdvice.com. Grindberg and I will be taking your starts and sits questions and doing our best. The following day will be Friday, and you will see the Dynasty Pulse, our Dynasty show, as well as our sit show from the Fantasy Forecast. Saturday is our start show, and then Breakfast with bigz, 8:30 a.m. Sunday, West Coast time. I will be sharing a cocktail and doing starts and sits advice. Spilled Coffee follows that show. Great people. You're going to want to watch it. We've got a documentary coming out that I am, as Amber said, featured in. But in the trailer, it's just my hat with my head down looking at my phone for some reason. Anyway, there's a documentary about sports betting and fantasy that's coming out that we're involved in. So look for that. And then we go back, run it back, start it off Tuesday, waiver wire and weekend recap show. A ton of content for you, not to mention all of the other great content on fantasysportsadvice.com, like Devi Dojo and other shows.
Be sure to check that out. And if you want any exclusive recipes for a spatchcock chicken, hit me up in my DMs. I'll hook it up. And from all of us on the Fantasy Sports Advice Network, from the Fantasy Forecast,
we hope you win.
Peace out, everybody. Have a great week.
We are here. We are here. FantasySportsAdvice.com, offering the best fantasy sports social media platform. Why join endless Discord communities or the trolls of Reddit? Fantasy Sports Advice is a community designed to help you win with 24/7 support. Go to FantasySportsAdvice.com and become a pro member for unlimited access. Again, go to Fantasy Sports Advice.